Welcome to my spoiler review of Ghostbusters Afterlife. This is only for people who have seen the movie. If you have not seen the movie, I need to tell you right now, this is one of those movies that you will want to see without knowing anything. And I know people say that all the time, and some people say, it doesn't matter. I don't really care that much. I don't care about Ghostbusters. I don't care about this and that. Dude, listen to me. The movie, you don't want to take this away from yourself. You don't want to take the heart and the emotion that this movie gives you away from yourself. Don't take it away from yourself. Don't, especially if you're a fan of the 84 Ghostbusters, which this movie's made for the fans of that movie. Do not take this away from yourself. Please, I am literally pleading with you. If you have not seen this movie, turn this review off, check out my non-spoiler review, and then go see the movie this weekend or as soon as you can. Please, I'm telling you, because I went into this movie not knowing a thing. I knew there were spoilers, I knew they were out there, and I avoided them because I wanted to see it and experience it and be surprised by it, and I was surprised by it pleasantly. I love Ghostbusters 1984. I love Ghostbusters 2. Not as good as the first one, but I love it. I used to love watching the Ghostbusters animated series from the 90s. I used to love watching or playing with the Ghostbusters toys. I love the Ghostbusters video game, the most recent one, the one that came out in 2010 or whatever for the Xbox, 2009. I have it still. I love these characters. I love what Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis created for us. I love the first two films. I watched these movies with my parents when I was a little kid. I watched them multiple times when I was a little kid, almost maybe 3-4 times a year. I watched them with every woman I've ever dated. Everyone. It's like a ritual. You have to watch Ghostbusters 1 and 2 with me at some point. And that's how much I love Ghostbusters. So this movie I hate the fact that people are saying it's too nostalgic. Yes, the movie is a love letter to 1984 Ghostbusters, but it's done right. It's nostalgia done right with respect to the original story while still not focusing on the old characters and focusing on new characters while still respecting and utilizing the old characters properly. I love this movie so very, very much. Let's talk about some spoiler stuff, okay? Specific things that I loved. And of course, I'm going to open up by talking about the big one. The end of the movie. I completely loved what they did with Harold Ramis, Egon Spengler in this movie. We lost Harold Ramis years ago, but his staple, his humor, his spirit, no pun intended, was all over this movie, literally in this case. We saw Egon Spengler, his spirit helping out his daughter. We saw him being there. No, I'm sorry, his granddaughter. His granddaughter. We saw him being there and as a ghost, as a ghostly presence all throughout the film, helping out. But it wasn't until the end when they actually did the father-son Kamehameha, except in Ghostbusters form, with his granddaughter and with the ghost of Egon. It was CGI. Obviously, the real Harold Ramis was very overweight in the past few years of his life. He was a bigger dude, compared to how he looked in the 80s. And, he didn't look like that. He probably wouldn't look like that now, but this is how Egon would look if he never gained weight and if he was still alive. They made him look older, and he was a Ghostbuster. He was the fourth Ghostbuster, and the incredible irony of the fact that a Ghostbuster was a ghost himself. That's beautiful, man. And the fact that he was there to hold the proton pack with his granddaughter. The fact that the other guys saw him. The other three Ghostbusters turned and saw him and were freaking out, but were happy. And then at the end, when he hugged his daughter and disappeared into the heavens, moving on, I cried. I cried. I was emotional throughout the entire movie. the soundtrack cues, the music, hearing the proton pack turn on, like that sound. What we didn't get from that terrible, disrespectful garbage that was a 2016 Ghostbusters film, that cash grab, we got it in this movie. This movie had the one thing that other Ghostbusters movies didn't have as much of. This movie was the least funny of all the Ghostbusters films, but it had the most heart. This movie had heart. I loved what they did. It's a tribute to Ghostbusters, a tribute to the character of Egon Spengler, and it's a tribute to Harold Ramis himself. It even had the text at the end that said, "For Harold." And the fact that he came in as a ghost to team up with the boys to put Gozer away one more time, incredible. Just incredible. I loved that. I loved it. It made the movie for me. It really did. It was so... I cried. And not only did I cried on the drive home. When I was at home thinking about the movie, I cried. It hit me, bro. It hit me. On top of that, the movie itself is pretty damn good. The build-up and the relationship between, like, the character of Phoebe and Podcast and how they kind of became buddies, kind of accidental friends. And then I like the relationship between Gary, who's Paul Rudd's character, and Carrie Coon, who's Callie, Egon's daughter. Like, I love that. I love them going out to dinner and her not really being into science because of, Egon. I love the fact that when they're in jail, right, with Bokeem Woodbine as the sheriff. I couldn't believe he was the sheriff. Bokeem Woodbine was the sheriff in this movie, and he's like, "Who are you gonna call?" And she ends up calling Dr. Raymond Stans, and he tells the story about how Egon disappeared, took all their equipment and all that. Like, and I'm just watching it, and I had a little bit of a problem with the fact that, like, I find it a bit unrealistic that Egon and Ray would have this kind of disagreement and that he would be so mad at him and not believe him when these guys literally saved New York together. How do you not believe Egon? Like, that is one thing I did not like, that he didn't believe Egon. I feel like that character would have believed Egon. Didn't really like that too much. I did love, though, even before the ghost of Egon showed up, seeing the three Ghostbusters appear. "Hey, Flat Top!" And, like, the whole line with Ray, even though it was dumb that she asked, "Are you a god again?" Still, the whole line with them looking at Ray, like, "Yeah, we're a god. Yeah, we're all gods." Like, that whole thing was so powerful. Oh my God, Bill Murray was so funny in this. He was only in the movie for a small scene, but he was so funny in this. This was what Force Awakens tried to be, but done right. Couple of issues I had with the movie. It wasn't that funny. The Stay Puft Marshmallow minis, I actually liked them more than I thought I was going to. It was too similar to the first film in that, like, it had similar story beats, but that's just how things were. But I can't knock it because it is a sequel, right? It's a sequel to the old movies, so it's going to have that. But I think it told enough of a fresh story with fresh new characters, like the character of McKenna Grace's Phoebe, because Phoebe was the main character. It was about her trying to find herself and find her place in the world. It was about her understanding her lineage as being the granddaughter of a Ghostbuster and being the granddaughter of the legendary Egon Spengler. And, like, that story, that was a great story. Because it wasn't about the old Ghostbusters, except maybe Egon. It was about his family, 3 generations of them, and the consequences of what he did and what he had tried to do. He turned out to be a real hero at the end when everything was said and done. It was such a powerful story. He was a hero the whole time, but you think he's not. Celeste O'Connor as Lucky Domingo, forgettable character. She was just there to play the girlfriend of Finn Wolfhard as Trevor Spengler. He was okay. He was different. He was older than Phoebe. He wasn't really the main character, but I think he played his part right as being like her sidekick, even though she was like the real scientist. The Ghostbusters, like this new generation of Ghostbusters, Phoebe, Trevor, Podcast, Lucky, They wore the outfits, right? But it wasn't the same because like they don't really have like a Venkman like comic relief guy. They have the scientist. It's not really the same. Maybe I guess Paul Rudd could do it, but to me, it's like it's not going to be the same as the original team, but that's okay because the original team was there. And also Ernie Hudson as like the sex appeal of the Ghostbusters, as he said in the end credit scene. I love the fact that he bought the firehouse. Like, I don't know where that's going for future movies, but man, did I love the scene with Sigourney Weaver. I'm watching the movie and there's no Sigourney Weaver, and I'm like, wait a minute. And then during the mid credits, it says and Sigourney Weaver, and then it cuts to Venkman and her, and it's almost implied that Dana Barrett and Peter Venkman wound up together. He looks way older because Bill Murray looks like he's knocking on death's door, and Sigourney Weaver looks really, really good for her age. But my God, like the scene of them doing the little cards from the very beginning of the first film. Oh my God, like you don't understand how much I love Ghostbusters, how much I love that first movie. And there were so many callbacks to it, but it was from the heart. It was the callback from the heart, yo. On top of that, Ivo Shandor as J.K. Simmons, it was a little bit weird because Ivo Shandor was the main villain of the 2009 video game, and this somewhat contradicts it. All I could think of is that maybe this Ivo Shandor is the real guy, and that one was just a ghost pretending to be Ivo Shandor. But seeing him showing up and like facing the leader of the cult of Gozer, facing Gozer and having Gozer rip him in half. I was so shocked at that. I was like, oh shit, like that was surprising. And Gozer herself, like that was interesting. It was Olivia Wilde that played Gozer. And that was a kind of a surprising thing. Like I wasn't expecting to see Olivia Wilde playing Gozer. But, seeing Gozer come back and the gatekeeper and the keymaker and like the scene where they rip each other's clothes off, like it was just a great continuation. I do wish that there was a different villain. Like I like Vigo the Carpathian. I like the different kind of Babylonian, Sumerian, whatever, gods or supernatural beings from the past. I like that more. Like that's different, but this worked because it proved that even though they saved New York in '84, the battle wasn't over yet. And now, hopefully, the battle is over because Gozer's been trapped, right? And now Gozer's probably never going to get out. Then again, who knows? Can you really defeat a Babylonian god for good? Difficult to say. But ultimately, and I also loved like how the post-credit scene with with the coin that Annie Potts as Janine Melton. It's like I love her scenes in the movie, but the fact that Janine gave Egon the coin, that was a deleted scene from the Ghostbusters from the first movie. That was a deleted scene from that movie, and they put it back into this movie, and she kept the coin. And then she interviews Winston, and Winston's like, yeah, I've always been a Ghostbuster at heart. Like, he had a successful life after being a Ghostbuster, but he was always a Ghostbuster at heart. Man, this movie did everything right. This movie did everything right. I love how for the first, like, act of the movie, they're trying to figure out, like, what's going on. Why are there so many different earthquakes going on? Like you don't really know what's going on. Like where's this going? The only thing I don't really know is who was the ghost that because the movie starts out with that like prologue of like Egon catching the ghost and then putting the trap in the bottom of the house and the little floorboards and everything. And then the ghost gets released, by Paul Rudd's character and even Mackenzie Grace. Like, who was that ghost that got released? The ghost flew by so fast I couldn't tell. Like, who was that? Also, the movie was missing. I was really hoping we would see. I mentioned in my non-spoiler the movie was missing two characters. We didn't see Louis Tully, not as a cameo and not as, a Ghostbuster. I wanted to see him there. And we didn't see Slimer. I wanted to see Slimer. I know they had Muncher, and I know they had Thick Neck, and that's all good. But I really wanted to see Slimer. I really did. I thought Slimer would at least be with the Ghostbusters, like what happened in the animated series, being their pal and whatnot. But there was no Slimer in this movie. And that was a big letdown for me. It really was a big disappointment. But man, maybe not a huge disappointment, but maybe a small one. It was a disappointment for me. I love this movie. I loved how they were able to use Muncher actually to bite the cells and whatnot. Like I said, the humor of this film is not really my cup of tea. There were some funny parts, don't get me wrong. It's not as funny as the first two movies because Bill Murray's so damn funny himself. He's so damn charismatic. But he was funny as hell for the scenes he was in. And I'm glad they saved the Ghostbusters, the original ones, for the very end. I'm glad they did that because it made sense. Like once Ray heard it was Egon's granddaughter, he knew something was up and went to go check it out with the other two guys. Maybe there's extra scenes they cut out of that, but I feel like they did a great job in holding it off till the big payoff at the end. Then you got that payoff at the end. Then you got another payoff with Egon. Then you got another payoff with Sigourney Weaver. Then you got another payoff with the Ernie Hudson scene at the very, very, very end. J.K. Simmons as Evil Shandor, bro. I was like, is that J.K. Simmons? That was awesome. Anyways, God, I love this movie. This movie was so powerful for me. It was so emotional. I told you I cried. I'm not going to lie. I cried multiple times. I cried. But the end with Egon, I was so moved by that because it looked like Harold Ramis. That likeness that they used with the CGI was so on point to how he used to look, just older. And it was Harold Ramis is gone. He's no longer with us, but this is the next best thing they could have done. And that scene made the movie amazing. I am so happy to now say that there are finally 3 Ghostbusters movies. There's finally 3 Ghostbusters movies that are good. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2, and Ghostbusters Afterlife. And maybe there'll be more in the future. I think if Jason Reitman comes back and directs it, this guy knows what he's doing. His dad obviously directed the first 2. He's right there with Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis as being a creative force behind this franchise. Have the Reitmans involved with this forever. Honestly, if they're going to do another one, which I don't know if they even should at this point, but if they are, Jason Reitman must direct it, and they can't rely on the past too much. But it needs to come out soon because Peter does not look so good. Bill Murray does not look so good. And I'm sure he's not unhealthy, but you never know. You never know. Annie Potts looked good too, by the way. She looked very young she actually looked really young. The women looked pretty good, like as far as aging goes. They look great. Anyways, Ghostbusters is a classic film, and this, while not a classic, was very, very good. I loved it. And if you are a fan of Ghostbusters, this needs to be part of your collection. I've said all I need to say. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you guys in the near future.